All right. So thank you all for joining us. Today is Tuesday, December 27th. I am Keisha Rogers. This is the LaRouche PAC Strategic Overview. I'll be joined tonight by Michael Stager. And I just want to say Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope everyone had a blessed and productive weekend. And despite the fact that I know many people across the country, especially in the eastern region of the nation, were facing devastating conditions going into and throughout this weekend, this Christmas holiday weekend. And we want to talk about why it is absolutely important that what LaRouche PAC has been laying out for the past several months and years around the physical economic solutions that must emerge to secure progress in our nation is really based on what we've experienced once again by the lack of infrastructure going into this recent period. So a lot is going on. We're going to talk about this. Michael's going to kind of give us an overview in just a few moments here about what we did in 2022, and you can expect LaRouche PAC is going to be putting out an overview of our activities, LaRouche PAC in Action, and what we called for around our program for national banking, our program for the endorsement of President Donald Trump for an economic solution to bring about a renaissance in nuclear power. So there's a lot that we've been involved in. And as we end this year of 2022, we have to be looking forward to what is it that we're building toward in 2024. And as many people know, we just saw a continuation of the disaster of the Biden collective and the uniparty with the $1.7 trillion in the omnibus bill, much of that going to the operations of the military industrial complex to continue to fund these endless wars that President Trump vowed and committed to put an end to and to get us out of. And at the same time, we are seeing a continuation of the threat toward nuclear war with Russia, as you have funding continuing to go to Ukraine and the operations to back this neo-Nazi operation in Ukraine. So we've seen a lot happening. The American people have put up with enough of this targeting of the American people, of our Constitution. And as we have discussed in prior discussions with the last several weeks of the Twitter files continuing to come out, to continuing to expose the operations around the deep state, the criminal operations of the FBI, the CIA, and the intelligence fraud that has been perpetrated against the American people. We are exposing all of this. Before I turn it over to Michael, he'll get more into detail. If you haven't seen the title fitting for this discussion tonight is going to be the question of putting the truth forward. What is it that the United States, the American people are fighting against, and how do we stop allowing for the wool to be pulled over the eyes of the American people, and that people have to continue to stand up and fight for the truth. So if you haven't seen it, very important statement has come out on LaRouche PAC, written by Barbara Boyd, exposing what we call the manufactured persona of Ron DeSantis. And people should read this, because the question of going into this 2024 election, who's going to be fit to lead? Who has truly qualified himself for the president of the United States? And this is an important, not just to know why DeSantis is not qualified, but who is actually running him. So lots to talk about tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and we can take your comments and questions after he finishes there, and looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks, Keisha. Hi, everyone. Welcome to be back. Welcome to people that are joining us for the first time. So I missed last week's discussion, which was led by Barbara Boyd and Bruce Director with Keisha on the fusion breakthrough and our role in that over the last 45 years, which is, in some sense, it just needs to be emphasized more and more how important these breakthroughs are, given the lack of commitment or funding the overall fusion project has. Yes, it's got venture capitalists and billionaires funding it, but we just threw a total of more than 100 billion. I think we're at 113, 116 billion towards this war in Ukraine, which I'll touch on more in a second. That kind of funding, which was done at the blink of an eye by this, do nothing corrupt Congress, only just shows that the priorities of our country are inverted entirely, and that fusion and that kind of program is what we need to have real political emphasis in terms of how we change the priorities of the country. Okay, that said, I was at a Turning Point conference, and I would say the conference as a whole was fairly disappointing, but there were a number of useful discussions had, a lot of very good organizing. There was one speech, though, that resonated with a number of people that attended. And that's really why I titled this discussion tonight, "We Need the Truth." It echoes the last Monday night discussion I held, which was that we need a movement premised on the truth. And it's not a new concept in some ways. I mean, it's a very old concept in many ways. But you see it, Trump's social media platform is called Truth. The big kind of underground media operation, Project Veritas, is basically Project Truth. So there's a sense of real deception. But in the speech that Matt Walsh gave, who's a contributor to the Daily Wire, he did the documentary, What is a Woman?, which was probably insufficient from what I've been told. I haven't watched it. But he been challenged in his speech. What he basically told us is that he's been challenged with the idea, are you willing to put your entire career on the line on this gender issue? And in some ways, it can seem, there are bigger problems than just, though the gender issue is an issue, it's not as if that is the dominating factor that's destroying our country. It's a very clear symptom. But simply defining a woman as the biological sex that carries the child to birth is not really going to solve the problem. But he was forced to reckon with something deeper that's going on. And in the speech, he recognized that what's at risk is the truth. And then he put something I thought accurately put. The only outlook, or I think he might have said opinion, but the only outlooks that are permitted are those outlooks which are not true. It is people that are committed to something true which are blocked and banned. It's those opinions. And I think that's an accurate assessment. And that's why the fusion question becomes so important, why Lyndon LaRouche was such a threat in the 1970s and 80s, to where they had to unleash a full-on federal assault on him, a blackout in the media after a massive slander campaign for years, because what has to be blocked is the truth. And that gives us a sense of what war we're fighting. And it gives a sense of how we win this war, because that's why we're assembled here. That's why we're engaged. That's why we make sacrifices, because it's not simply to die on a certain battle hill of gender issues, but it is that the sacrifice to win a war that shuts down and challenges any system, any authority, however strong they think they might be, that stands on the basis of a lie. Because that can only lead to the total destruction, not only of the intended victims, but of everyone, including the past and future of mankind. It's a threat to civilization itself. And I think we all know this, because we know that the magnitude of what I'm referencing, I mean, you're on this call, you've interacted with LaRouche organizers in some form, in some way, emails, phone calls, your contributors, your donors, your activists, your organizers, and your citizens and your members of this ongoing kind of dying civilization we've been a part of. You see it in climate change. You see it in the Iraq wars. You know, this question came up in my mind a number of weeks ago when I saw another person online with a Substack who was dedicated to the gender CRT whole fixation and cultural phenomena. And in one of his Twitter posts, he mocked the idea that the Straussians were responsible for the Iraq war. And that was not something of a generic hypothesis that a number of people held. That was the hypothesis put forward by this organization, by Lyndon LaRouche and some of his collaborators, with a series of pamphlets entitled The Children of Satan. In that report, the first one, The Children of Satan, it was a deep study of the outlook of Leo Strauss, because all of the people leading the push for the Iraq war happened to be part of this Straussian network. And just in quick summary, the premise of Strauss was that civilization is premised, the basis of holding civilization together is the ability and willingness to lie, cheat, steal, etc., to do whatever's necessary, including outright total disregard for the truth. And he even argues that Plato knew that Plato truly agreed with Thrasymachus, that might makes right, that those in power have a responsibility to hold on power at any cost. And that's not something to just kind of throw a tissue at. That's an idea that you can take the fabric of our civilization and toss it out. So the wars, that's the Patriot Act and the surveillance state, which have been lied to over and over again. We all remember James Clapper. No, there's no surveillance of the American people. We can remember, what's his name from Twitter? The goatee guy, Dorsey and his mushroom factory called Twitter, whatever it is. You know, no, we're not collaborating with the federal government. No, we're not spying on the American people. No, whatever. They just incessantly lie all the time. And the difference is on climate change. If we don't shut down carbon dioxide, AOC, in 10 years, the whole world is going to burn up. Obama, if everybody had air conditioners, the whole oceans would boil up and I guess disintegrate into steam, into space, and be gone. They lie constantly. All they do is lie. Our music is based on lying. There's no musical artist today that's actually truthful about who they are. The entire social media concept is what's the best lie you can tell about yourself that's still believable? So you take the best pictures, you frame them the best way, you try to have the best friends and images. It's just incessant. The entire financial process, the entire news media, the entire election program. They just lie and lie. And you get a lot of people, many on this call, all of us on this call, who grow increasingly frustrated. You have a lot of people who are pulled into this political fight around election integrity, who can't fathom, we've just got to get the word out that they stole the election. Well, wait, you have to ask yourself a question first. Are people surprised they did? Do people think that was unexpected? I can tell you, for people 45 and younger, they're not surprised it was stolen. They're not surprised they lied about it. And they don't think there's really an option that's different. I'm not cynical about that. That's the reality of the younger generations. Not all of them. I saw them at Turning Point, and I'll touch on that, towards the end, because there were some really interesting factors. But a large portion of the population is not surprised at that. And ultimately, if the other option is Mitch McConnell, who says the number one priority for the Republican Party is funding Ukraine, and then the other Republicans say, well, we shouldn't fund it except with an audit, or we shouldn't keep throwing money at Ukraine. If they want to have a war with Russia and pull all of Europe into a war, then but with a bunch of neo-Nazi brigades with guns at the government of Ukraine and so on, so be it. But we should. Trump's the only political leader in the United States who says, I would end the war. I would end it. It should be ended, and I would do it, and I know how to do it, and I could do it in a day. And he should be applauded for that kind of consistent courage on these geopolitical issues. The one reason Trump was compelling and remains the most compelling political leader in the United States today is because the one thing Trump is telling you is what he really thinks. That is true, that he's true. Ron DeSantis is not true, as Keisha just pointed to. And people are finding out about Twitter. I can tell you from having lived in the Bay Area for a number of years, everybody in Silicon Valley knows that everybody working at these companies at the higher levels came right out of Washington. And it's not just Silicon Valley. Try all of the major Hollywood studios, CIA. CIA is implanted in all of these places, as I'm sure the FBI is. That's what we're learning from the Twitter files. And it's not just them. Verizon, AT&T, NBC, Comcast, Disney, ABC, ESPN, you name it. There isn't a major, all of the Wall Street banks have CIA infiltration in them, whether they want it or not. We've been immersed in this. We are swimming in an ocean of a psychological program that's meant to keep power premised on a lie because the truth has been totally disregarded. There is no truth. As the famous saying goes from Pontius Pilate, what is truth? This is what Lyndon LaRouche recognized, because the truth is measured by what? Uniquely by the human mind. It's not a concept even able to be associated with a computer or an animal. The smartest dog has no notion of truth. Love, yes. Truth, no. A computer can only tell you what's logically consistent. And logical consistency isn't truth. What is truth? That's a profound question. It's worth getting into. We make indications in the email we sent out today. And it's certainly something that is entirely premised on the introduction by Solon, Socrates, and Plato into the political discourse of ancient Athens and then into Western civilization. It's the very basis for scientific discovery. It was the entire foundations for what Christ and the Christian movement introduced. And much of the entire monotheistic religions from Alexander the Great as a legacy shaped Judaism, Christianity, and Islam around this conception of truth. So what's targeted is a very, very foundation of civilization. And to restore that is to recruit. Now, what seems to me, and then what the question comes up, and I'm sure many people will ask it on this call, is, well, okay, how do we do that? How do we build a movement based on truth? How do we recreate the movement that the apostles and disciples created around this question of truth, or this legacy, this intellectual legacy of Plato and Socrates? Well, the question isn't how we do it immediately. Part of that is Donald John Trump. DeSantis, as we exposed in our essay, is one more narcissistic concoction out of Yale and Harvard law with no intellectual or emotional demonstration of human outlook in any way. He's a capable political debater, lawyer, but being a capable lawyer doesn't mean you're really a functioning human being. I think we all know that. It's not a bad thing to be a good lawyer. It just doesn't demonstrate a real question of humanity. And DeSantis hasn't shown that. In every recount, he's a lackluster politician with no empathy for the population, no ability to even work competently with his staff, and ideologically rabid in the ilk of John Bolton. And that tells you everything about where our foreign policy would go. As Roger Stone said in an interview recently, I'd like to know where Ron DeSantis stands on Ukraine, because he hasn't had to answer that question as a governor. Trump will probably tear him to pieces. He's already been endorsed by Paul Ryan, Jeb Bush, which should tell you everything you need to know about what Ron DeSantis represents. But Trump's campaign, as we've said here before, and as we now head into 2023, and by the time of the spring, you'll see this campaign start to move. The Trump train start to get into motion. The intervention via the presidency is a unique creation of our founding fathers. That there's a way to intervene into the cultural dialogue of the country, to challenge these severely cynical and false axioms that people become too tolerant of. Because most of the population knows what's happening is wrong. They know we're lying about climate change. I've seen it. I've gone to the largest science conferences in the world. They were often held in San Francisco. I would talk to a lot of the young scientists, and they would just outright tell you, but if I don't basically pay homage to the lie, I will never have funding. I will never get I won't get my graduate degree. If I have it, I won't get any funding to do research, and I'll basically be a pariah with no job and no purpose and no life. So it's not as if people don't know it's a lie. They know it's a pagan apocalyptic religion. That discussion was held with them. They know it. They find it funny. But what are they supposed to do, so to speak? How do they survive? How do they pursue their dreams of being a scientist? So it's not as if people don't know. Trump awakened that in 2016 with his campaign. And it can be and needs to be even more profound today. And he himself, when he announced for his campaign, called for such a movement. But that movement won't be simply built by a campaign, especially a campaign that will be run probably more like 2016 with a small handful of very close collaborators with Trump running the campaign versus relying on any way on this failed corporation called the Republican National Committee or Republican National Party. But what do? Well, we talk to people about that such a movement today is needed, that we have to shake off the scales of cynicism and devote ourselves to what's true and recognize that only by restoring the truth, that we will live and die by that sword, on that hill, and let our enemies attempt to challenge that. And this raises the much deeper philosophical questions that our nation has to reckon with. We've been lying for a very long time. We've accepted a destructive American government for a very long time towards ourselves and towards the rest of the world in many ways. We all know that. Most of the Americans know that. But there's no reason to have any shame as long as we're willing to take responsibility to change the course of direction today. The very premise of this nation, which is different than any other nation, to the extent American exceptionalism is a truthful concept, it is because this is the only nation founded that the concept of truth, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that only exists on the premise that a human mind exists to ascertain what's true, that we could even be considered equal. That participation in such a dialogue and a premise for a viable government had never been developed before or since. It's a unique concept. It's why those founding documents don't need to be changed. We don't need a constitutional convention. That's an absurd lie. And by the way, Ron DeSantis supports that lie, in case anybody here actually thinks Ron DeSantis is viable. I'm just intending to put every stake in that coffin tonight as possible. But we can revive this conception of the United States. And it's that conception which has been the driving force of the advancement of human civilization these past 600 years. It is the most powerful conception in human history. And time again, when it's reapplied, it has awakened in people a sense of their own humanity. Because people are willing to accept that. They're not willing to accept that people who run the biggest financial fraud in history get bailed out by $30 trillion. They know that's not truthful. But we're going to address these deeper questions. And as a point, and that's really the kind of, there's a number of things to address. You know, Carrie Lake's lawsuit was ultimately declined. That's unfortunate, but it's not surprising. The judges, which probably were lawyers, are not going to put themselves on the line, their lives or careers on the line for the truth. Lawyers aren't trained to do that. Lawyers are trained to argue their side. And oftentimes the judge's side is the side in power. That's ultimately how this breaks. Going to the judges to say, which side are you on, the people or those in power? I think we can be pretty clear. The judges are going to side with the people in power. One of Leo Strauss's leading teachers and mentors was Carl Schmitt, one of the crown jurist of Nazi Germany. The situation in the war in Ukraine is incredibly devastating for a possible breakout. The bizarre thing is, it's not getting cold in Ukraine. It's still in the 40s throughout Ukraine. It's not freezing. The ability for Russia to run an offensive requires that process. While that's ongoing and hangs in the balance, and I think everybody saw the sweatshirt-wearing dwarf come and address from Ukraine, Zelensky, the clown, address U.S. Congress, which was really just a PR campaign by MI6 and the CIA for more funding and more psychological warfare upon the American people. The real operation of instigation is also expanding to Kosovo and Serbia. Larry Johnson has something. He's responding to this as well. It's been ongoing now for some time. Kosovo is where this escalation started in 1998, 1999, with Bill Clinton launching NATO air raid and precision missile strikes and so on Serbia, which is a closely tied, both religious and culturally, to Russia in the Balkans. So that remains very much unresolved and remains a dangerous situation. And most likely Putin and the Russians know what they're managing and will deal with it. But we're dealing with a very, you could say, loose cannons here in the West. This is the legacy. And if you look back at Lyndon LaRouche's writings, he consistently warned about provoking what might seem like a German-Russian conflict or other conflicts, but ultimately would be an Anglo-American conflict with Russia that would just keep being incited. Based on what? Based on a complete lie. A lie of Russia as the worst enemy to the United States imaginable. There's no justification for that. It's constant propaganda and lies. I've mentioned the climate change. It's hard to even feel like I have to make a case on that to this audience. I don't think it's the time and place to try to spend time. But the real question is not simply, is carbon dioxide changing the environment? But it's challenging, it's feeding, the argument itself feeds the cynicism that the ultimate problem is human beings in their creative and industrial and productive ways of growing families, growing cities, growing nations, growing companies, building up productive capabilities, making advancements and discoveries, exploring space, is in any way harmful to the universe. That's the premise of that. And it's the most satanic and evil conception possible. It is the big lie of this entire current globalist system, that we are harmful by expanding our capabilities, by increasing and improving our diets versus, now eating crickets. And the undergirding of much of this is this financial and economic system. And it's very clear this thing is unstable. If there is any cause for the panic and desperation for a war with Russia, which was very clear going back to February of last year, that the Biden regime, the collective, the Anglo-American, this Anglo kind of British empire, was desperate for a conflict when they were unwilling to even prolong any type of conflict through negotiation at all. They basically begged Russia to invade. They wanted conflict. The underlying aspect of that, regardless of what the Federal Reserve does, because there's no coherence. The Federal Reserve may raise rates, and really inappropriately, the way they're doing it, basically paying the big banks 5% returns on all of their cash holdings. While the Biden regime just prints more and more debt and money, blowing out the entire dollar-based system. That they're clearly in a desperate and panicked operation because they can't continue to run the racket they're running. Doesn't mean anybody knows how it plays out, how it snaps, but the so-called everything bubble is very much that. They've put everything on the table. The kitchen sink, everything. Everything's been built up into a financial asset and blown up with more debt. And so how they can't manage that process except through writing off of much of the debt. And they need a justification so they can implement that kind of very untruthful, very big lie of bankrupting and looting the population and then telling you to stuff it while they basically wipe off their own debts. That's why the question of political power becomes so important, because we decide to hold them accountable for their lies, for their debts. We put them out of existence. We begin to immediately invest into the long-term future of the human race and of our nation. That's why the fusion breakthrough is so important. And one thing we saw at Turning Point Conference, and I'll just end on this because I think it's, there are a lot of young people who at this point would prefer to identify with everything that is attacked and criticized by the current system. So whatever it is, if it's coal, if it's oil, if Alexander Hamilton is, a bad guy, whatever it is, which gives you hopes for the resurrection of Lyndon LaRouche and his true legacy, because there's probably no person attacked more in the second half of the 20th century than Lyndon LaRouche politically. they want to identify with it simply because they despise the current system that much. These are kids, young adults, 24, 25 and younger. And there are a lot of them, I think, to a large extent because of Trump's first term, because he opened up and challenged a lot of the axioms historically, what to look at, that they have dived into and have started to study the very American system this organization revived back in the 70s. Henry Charles Carey, Matthew Carey, Friedrich List, Hamilton. These guys are hungry. They're studying it. They're reviewing it. They're wanting discussions about it. And the sense of industrializing the United States, ending the globalization cheap labor policy. And I'd have to note, yes, the FBI was paying Twitter for its services. Yes, the FBI and CIA are in all these organizations, as I mentioned. But I was even stunned to find out that Twitter had shopped out its censorship agenda. Yes, to some bots that they built. They had shopped it out to like the Philippines, like it was a call service for Comcast or something. Like even the censorship program has been shopped out to cheap labor. That is the epitome of a globalist British imperial system. So they want a fundamental rejection of that. They want to see the industrialization of the United States. They're hungry, they're edgy, they reject this constant sense of lies and relativism. They have some sense of truth. They come out of much of a Christian kind of family tradition in many respects. They may not have all the answers, but there is a hunger which intrinsically exists. It's inevitable to come out of the younger generations to reject the insanity of the current system. But it's going to depend, their ability to have something to grab onto is going to depend upon us igniting wherever we can, not that we know how to build a movement. You don't have to know how to do it. Except one thing, we will do it by increasing the dialogue of more people around how do you build a movement today around the concept of truth. Bring people into that discussion. Truth on the potential for development. If you're in New Mexico, which has got huge land potential, huge resources, oil, farming, sunlight, it just needs tons of water and tons of energy. Nuclear power, it's got 2 massive national labs, just as an example. Right, Mexico is in deep poverty. New Mexico is in deep poverty as a state in our country. It could be a massive industrial powerhouse. The potential to develop rapidly our nation and even much of mankind is the very premise of truth. It's how we as individuals participate in creation by fostering that kind of dialogue and discussion with our fellow citizens. So we get out there and we incite people to say, yeah, okay, so we do need a movement dedicated to these questions. Regardless of what it is, regardless if it ends up offending some of my own opinions, that's less important than building a civilization premised on the truth. That my pleasure, my power, my influence, my legacy, my old note cards, my belief system, that doesn't matter. What matters is the truth. We'll be accountable to that. That can inspire a political earthquake in this nation that doesn't just merely get Donald Trump elected, doesn't just shut down the groomers and pedophiles running amok within our institutions today, but can actually begin to reverse the cultural decline that accelerated in the 1960s, but began with the assassination of William McKinley. That was the real coup. And with Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson and the onset of World War I, we saw the real cultural destruction. And it's time to reverse this idea that somehow power is more important. Political power today is more important than the truth tomorrow. Our nation is an example that the opposite is true. The principle of truth is actually the basis of real political power, not just today, but for all time. That's civilization. That's why we're here. And if this is going to be the last discussion we hold together in 2022, it should be the basis of our discussion tonight. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully that gives us a basis for some questions and discussion, Keisha, and I'll throw it back to you.